Robbins, and welcome to Rethinking Grades. We're going to kind of go through a bit of a journey together, and I'm going to beg of all of you, stay till the end. I promise, this isn't bad. But what's happened is over my career, I've stumbled on something and I think it works really well, and I'd love to share it with everyone. I'm going to put this up at the end too, but this is a link to the entire document. It's my hope that people are like, wow, this is really awesome and I want to use it, and here it is. I just realized I may have deleted my contact info from there, but I'll put my contact info there too, because if you want to communicate more about this, I gladly will. I can zoom into a meet with other people if needed, because I think this is really good stuff. Okay, so here's what I'd like everyone to do. It's just a quick turn and talk to each other. Share with the folks nearest to you. What's your name? How long have you been in education? What's your least favorite vegetable and why? And why did you decide to pay this session a visit? So everyone talk to each other for a moment. There's 4 of you. Hi, I'm Jeff.
Go first.
So yeah, I've been teaching science for over 10 years.
Rock on.
Is sauerkraut vegetable?
It could be. I'll let you hate that.
And I'm been thinking about grading and reflecting on grading, and I'm not satisfied with grading all that it entails. So I'm here to gain new insights.
Nice. I may have something that'll work for you.
Yeah.
I'm Katie. This is my 11th year teaching.
Rock on.
I don't like eggplant.
Ooh.
I haven't found a preparation I liked. And I came here, we're revamping our whole science program, so figured assessments is a good place to start with that as well.
Nice.
Of course. I'm Rich. I'm the District Supervisor of Science in Westminster Plainsboro. I spent 12 years in the classroom. This is my 33rd year of public service. My 11th year in curriculum instruction after having been at the building level. My least favorite vegetable is probably okra, because it probably wasn't cooked right maybe, but it felt kind of
It can be slimy.
It's like, no, I just sneezed this and I don't eat that. And then why did you decide to pay? I'm always interested in assessment and fair and equitable assessment.
Come on in. Yeah. I started early because I'm greedy with time. Come on in.
And it shouldn't be locked into a certain grade.
No worries. That's awesome. I'm Jeff. Jen, nice to meet you. Okay. So I heard some kind of neat things, and a lot of people, it's funny because most people will dislike vegetables on texture and mouthfeel, a lot of times even more than smell. I think we heard that. So things that we should be thinking about, and this is where things get tricky. Midway through my career, I'm like, well, why are we doing this? And I felt like some of the answers was we ought to. And I'm like, well, what's the research? And it's like, we ought to. And things that we want to think about is how we use our grades. Are they measuring our students' competency? Are they measuring compliance? Are the grades punitive? And also, can our students take risks? Because in science especially, we don't necessarily want the students to get the right answer the first time, because that may, we want students to design, experiment, and not have things work out that well. So who am I? My name's Jeff. This is my 30th year teaching science. I started at the high school, then went to the middle school for a bunch of decades, and went back to the high school. I currently teach environmental home tech, makerspace, and RoboLab. A little bit of my history is important because embedded in this section here is a willingness to fail and a willingness to take risks. My first try at college, I failed out because I got a season pass for skiing way too cheap. After college, I became a Maine raft guide and guided in Massachusetts, New York State, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. And as a raft guide, you lean into failure. You flip boats, and that's just kind of life. I also am a wilderness first responder, a mountain bike coach, and I even getting better at chainsawing. So now, the big thing is this timeline is where things start to fall into place. I started working in outdoor retail in the 1990s, and that was a wild place. The outdoor industry was truly bizarre. In 1995, I took my first wilderness first aid class, and I killed all of my patients in the practice. I was really depressed. At the end of my training, after 8 days, I looked at the instructor and I said, listen, here's what I need for my final. I want somebody to have a paper cut, I want to put a Band-Aid on it, I want to call it a win. And he said, okay. And I'm like, okay. And we went to bed. We were supposed to get up at about 8 o'clock the next morning. At 6 o'clock, he's going, there's a plane crash. And I'm like, ah. We go outside, and the scenario was there's a plane crashed into a mountain, all these things. And I show up, I thought I did everything right. And at the end of the scenario, he's like, Jeff, you lost 2 patients. And I'm like, oh. And I failed again. But what was really interesting is all the times they've actually laid hands on things in the field, I've been able to hand off my patient in either the same as or better than condition to the next level of care. And I would argue we want to fail in practice, and we want to be on it when we need to be on it. In '96, I enrolled in the teacher program, and in mid-2000s, I saw a gentleman named Rick Wormley. I'm not sure if he's still going, and he was talking about the idea of a redo policy. And this kind of sank into my head. I passed my driver's test, the driving part, first time. The written part, I failed 3 times because I disagreed with the DMV's dumb answers. And finally, the 4th time is I went to the exam and I'm like, I disagree with your dumb answer, but I'm saying this because I want my license. And I passed. There are a lot of doctors who didn't pass their boards the first time. There are a lot of lawyers who didn't pass. There's a lot of drivers who didn't pass. And that's okay because we want them to pass, learn, and get better. In 2010, my principal, who's now my vice superintendent, sent me to see a gentleman named Alfie Cohen. Woo! Prepare yourself for him. He is probably one of the smartest people I've ever seen, and he breaks people. He chatted about compliance and competence, whether or not grades really mattered, and this idea of something called Bagooty, which is better get used to it. If you're a parent, you've come across the Bagooty argument, where a teacher says, I'm doing this to your child now because this will happen to your child later, and I need to prepare them before it. Well, if you follow the Bagooty argument, there's kind of a scary thing, which means that we should really be pinning people down to tables, drilling into their teeth because they might get a cavity later and we want to prepare them for it now. And then people are like, oh my gosh, that's horrible, why would you do it? And it's like, we're doing that to kids, eek. But all this kind of led me to this kind of place. So Alfie, in this article in '99, said, hey, grades have 3 main effects. They tend to reduce students' interest in learning, they tend to reduce students' preference for challenging tasks, and grades tend to reduce the quality of students' thinking. And embedded in this, we're trying to take, it's like traditional grading a lot of times can push kids away from risk because they want to make sure they get all the gold stars right away. And it also can lead to shortcuts to try and get all the gold stars right away. Alfie said this in this conference I was in, and I went home, and thankfully it was a Thursday night conference. On Friday I was kind of quiet in school, and then I had a weekend to think about it. And this is in middle school, and I came back and I turned to the kids and I said, listen, I want to try something with you. And they're like, what? I'm like, let's try the next unit without grades. We'll just have feedback and no grades. And one of my students said, you know what, Mr. Robbins? I'm not going to do anything without grades. And I said, cool. So we went through the unit. It was a unit on evolution. He participated every day. And at the end of the unit, we had a round table. We talked about it. And I turned to the kid and I said, hey, listen, remember how you said you weren't going to do anything? And he goes, yeah. And I'm like, you kind of participated every day. And he said, yeah. I said, and? He goes, you cheated. You made the information too interesting for me not to participate. It's like, wonder what we're going to do with that. But that was kind of like a really interesting carrot and stick thing. The problem is, though, is with our traditional lives and traditional requirements, we don't have enough time to give all our kids really deep feedback by ourselves. I'm not sure, you already did the one on AI feedback? Or Tom, are you doing AI feedback tomorrow? Oh, okay. So it is possible to use AI to give better and more meaningful feedback to students. Please look for it. But under traditional things, I've seen non-traditional schools where all they give is student feedback. And if you're just doing that, the workload's too much and it tends to break teachers. So now, this is kind of where it gets really interesting. There's competency and there's compliance. We want our students to be competent. We want them to demonstrate mastery. A lot of times teachers use grades to ensure compliance. If you don't do X, you're getting Y grade. And it's especially when things are turned in late. So now, and again, just quick throw some math up at us really fast, and then we're going to get into the nitty gritty. A 0 is a punishment. So let's say we give a student a 0 versus a 50% on an assignment. So the student has 3 assignments. They're all worth 100 points. It's 100 plus 0 plus 100. It's 200 divided by 3. It's a 66. So we say that this child is demonstrating 66% of the competency we expect them. If we fill in with a 50.5 as a placeholder, like my district uses Genesis, and if you hit missing, it auto-calculates 0. But if you were to use a 50.5, we'll come back to that decimal, it goes to now 255, which is an 85.1. Still doesn't fully demonstrate the kid's competency, but it is way better than them having a D average. It's a B average. But the other thing too is by using a 50.5 instead of a 0, student still has hope and a chance to work their way to a passing grade. I teach high school, and sometimes in high school, students are like, I've had colleagues say, wow, this kid's super disruptive. And I'm like, well, how are they doing in class? They're like, they've got a 22 for the year. And at that point, I'm kind of a little bit of a chaotic individual. If I know that there's no chance for me to finish the class with any hope of doing it, I'm going to just cause chaos, and I'm an adult. So I can't imagine like someone who has less of a frontal lobe than me doing better. Okay, so here we go. Everyone's going to take a deep breath with me, and we're going to go for it. Here's what I've discovered. The easiest way to do this, and this is the one part that's a challenge, is we've got to lean into all 4 parts. And I'm going to argue that it works, and I'm going to have evidence, and it's good. We have a late absent redo form for our students. We have the ability to redo some assignments. We use decimal points, and we get rid of zeros. Zeros are horrendous. Now, here's the thing that's great. You have better reflection of student competency. Students can take risks and pursue mastery. If you don't do it the first time and you can redo it, woo, it's a win. You have much better data for meetings with guidance, with special education, with annual reviews. You have better recommendation and placements for the following years. We have less grade inflation, and it also aligns with the new multi-tiered support system where we're trying to have more interventions to make sure we can help protect kids earlier and sooner. So this is the moment, and this is why I mentioned outdoor retail. I worked for a company called Eastern Mountain Sports. Gone, but not forgotten. I have a QR code that'll give you the whole slide deck too. And at Eastern Mountain Sports, we would have a backpack or a water bottle, and the water bottle was 0.00. It would be $10, 0.00. It's a horrible color purple, doesn't sell. So we say it's 0.98. And then at some point it's 0.78, and then it's 0.75. And that indicates to me how long it's been on the shelf, how badly loved it is, and all these different things, and that's all happening. So here's what I've done. Take a 10-point assignment, If the assignment's turned in on time, it's graded as it is and has a 0.0 ending. If the student is choosing to redo the assignment, it costs them 1/10 of a decimal point. So instead of a 10 point out of 10 point, they have a 9.9. So I look at Genesis, I look at my grade book, and I say, ooh, come on in, there's tons of seats. This student redid the assignment. If the student turns it in late, it has a 0.8 ending. I have some students who are like, nah, I'm not gonna write, but I know what's going on. Do you wanna talk to me about it? Sure. I'm a science teacher, not language arts. I don't need an essay. We sit down, we talk, and that's 0.7. If the assignment was not turned in, it has a 0.5 ending. And if the assignment is locked and the student can't redo it, let's say midterm, stuff like that, it's 0.1. Here's the big thing. This shows us compliance without jeopardizing the competence. So this is, and where it gets really, really awesome. Yeah, you can ask questions.
Do you share that list with the parents? Like, look,
Yeah.
they know what it is too?
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Okay, perfect.
And then here's what's awesome. You go in, because it's like, I'm not sure if anyone's had this conversation where there's a student who's struggling and they need help and they need interventions, but just failing the student into the ground isn't going to do anything really positive. But if the student has every assignment either being turned in late or not being redone, and you can quickly glance in the grade book and see that, when you sit down with guidance, when you sit down with a special education meeting, you can say, hey, I've got this additional detail and I can talk to you about this. So that's kind of wild. Now, there is a couple of unintended consequences that I did not see coming. First, the redo late submission form. I use a Google form to it, and I explain to the students that this is the cost of having to redo the assignment. The form can be absolutely hysterical. It's like a confessional. Students will pour their heart out, and it's really adorable, but unintentionally, every year I've accidentally unearthed the kid who's presenting normal in class, but having some sort of tremendous crisis. And the kid said, the reason I didn't turn this in was because my parents are getting a divorce and I'm not sleeping in it. And I'm like, whoa, stop everything. You're not turning in this assignment. We're not grading this. This assignment's excused. We're getting you to guidance. We're doing this, this, and this, and this. And the other thing too, which is really wild, which is kind of a pretty amazing anecdote. I had a young woman who was absolutely overwhelmed with the play. She turned in something late, but in the assignment she explained how, hey, I turned this thing in late because I'm overwhelmed and everything like this. Made sure we got her all the support. Later in the year on a field trip, a student comes over to me and is like, Mr. Robbins, I've got this, we've got this really big problem. My friend over there just lost her uncle. She just found out now. I have another friend who's staying with her right now. We need you to help us with her. And because we had built all this trust through this silly late absent form, or not silly late absent form, we were able to do that. And it was just a really, totally worth 0.2 of a point. Like it really, really mattered. So this is what the form looks like. What's your first name? What's your last name? What period do you have class? Paste a link to the complete assignment here. When was the assignment due? And when are you submitting it? Google automatically puts the time and date on it, but I want the students to think about it and reflect on that. And then why is the assignment being submitted late? If you're sick, you can just say that you're sick and you don't need to give details. That's it. But this is where we've unearthed some really extraordinary stories. So this shows, I redacted the names, but this shows from a few years back. And then what I've done too, and this is again where it starts getting fun. You got the title of the assignment, you got a link to the assignment, you've got when it was submitted. Google also told me when it was submitted, so these two should match. This is the part where it's really interesting, because if a student says, use my class time more wisely, use my class time more wisely, use my class time more wisely, you can sit down with the student after the third one of them and being like, hey, you said this 3 times, it doesn't seem to be working for you. Let's talk about strategies. Let's see what's going on. Then there is all sorts of other things, but occasionally over here is where we pop up something that's a bit bigger and a bit scarier and we need to address, which is really big. The highlighting is I don't go through the spreadsheet every day. I'll usually say, like, on Thursday afternoon, I'm going to go through this. Come on in, there's plenty of seats. On Thursday afternoon, I'm going to go through it, and then I highlight all the assignments that I've updated, and then I can see where it was. This, I was working with a co-teacher, and she would sometimes go through them on her prep period and highlight the ones that she had gone through. And so then we're not just doing double work. Okay, so now, this is the big thing. The grades tell a great story. If I see a student has a ton of 9s, they're doing well in class but are redoing almost every assignment and will struggle to demonstrate full competency on their first try, I'm not necessarily going to say to that student, hey, you should definitely be taking like an AP class next year, because I don't know if you're going to be able to keep up with the pace. And it's very concrete. I have a 0.8, I'm going to be like, hey, yeah, you can do that class, but you don't turn anything in on time and you're killing me, Smalls. And a 0.7 is going to be something where it's like, again, you're not going to be a great candidate for a class with a lot of writing, but if you're able to talk through your answers, you can do this. And then this part here is so powerful with meetings with parents, with meetings with guidance, with special education meetings, because you can give a huge amount of more detailed feedback without having to dig into each individual assignment. Okay. Any questions so far? Because this is kind of like, it's like once you see it, you're like, oh, well, that kind of works, but it's also kind of, well, okay. So now, I have had some pushback when I showed this to parents. I had a parent say, wait a second, you mean a kid gets a 50% for doing nothing? And I said, yes, they fail. They're like, but they did nothing and they still fail. I'm like, yeah, they're not going to pass the class, they still fail. Then the next comment was somebody said, but wait a second, if the kid redoes the assignment, they can get almost the same score as a student who did 100% the first time. I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, that's not fair. And I'm like, why isn't it fair if the student, 30 years, got tenure? I'm like, well, why isn't it fair if this other student demonstrated full competency? Aren't you happy that the student demonstrated that they fully understand things? And the parent wanted to say, but my student's more important and I don't want my student's grade impacted by the other student. And it's like, ooh, that's kind of yucky. But yeah. So now, here's where it gets really interesting and exciting. The redo system allows us to crush grade inflation. In my career, there have been moments where I've looked at an assignment that's not that great and I've been like, and it felt really bad about giving the kid a bad grade, because if you give a 7th grader a bad grade, clearly not going to be able to get into Harvard. But, and there's people who are like, yep. But if a student only demonstrated 2% of the competency, or even worse, they said like a big object falls faster than a smaller object, like 1 out of 10 points, but you can redo it. The kid has misconceptions. We can't have a grade that says that they're demonstrating competency even if we feel bad, but because they can redo it, we can go back and fix that. And this is kind of the big thing that made me really happy. But there's also this little thing right here. Most of us have our first marking period ending around Thanksgiving about. So if I have a student who's like, you remember that thing we did on September 2nd? I really want to learn to be competent at now. Like, no, you don't. You just don't want the grade that's in the grade book. So that's not going to fly. But the students get used to this very, very quickly, and they're able to fix it And we don't have to inflate grades anymore. We can grade it exactly as it lies, but because they can fix it. So now, there are things. In our school district, we have this giant junior research project, which is this big beast. There's also midterms, there's also finals. There's also bigger assignments that are scaffolded out. And with those assignments, they're gonna be one and done, but it's not a surprise for the student. The students have chances to work on them. There's gonna be rubrics, there's gonna be examples, there's gonna be things that are helping lead them in, and the students could potentially go over rough drafts in advance, with the exception of like midterms and finals, but for those, usually there's study guides and there's ability to prepare for it. So it is possible to have things that are, yep, that's it. Okay. So why should we do it? This is helping us make grades much more visible. It's going to show competency and it can show compliance. It gives us a much more detailed narrative for meetings. It helps make our students' behavior visible all year. And it gets rid of the M in Genesis for us. And it means, and now this is where it's good for teachers. When I collect an assignment, a grade goes in for everybody. So if you didn't give me anything and it's at 50.5%, I'm done. It's now the student's responsibility. I'm not chasing the student all over to fix it. When I was teaching middle school, when a 50.5 came in, usually the student got real interested after going home and the parents logged in. And the good thing is, students like, I forgot to turn it in. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna take care of it tomorrow. The late absent form is there, everything's there, we take care of it. Next day, everything's good. Sometimes I'll get a parent email and I'll explain to them, your student didn't turn it in yet. This is what we're going to do. Please send them in tomorrow, and it gets done. It also is a super powerful tool for student recommendations, for authentic recommendations, and not crushing a student's confidence, which I think is also really important. For me, especially in science, especially when we're doing experiments, especially when we're trying to figure out things, especially when we're revising models, we want students not to be successful right away. We just shouldn't penalize them for it. At least that's what I think. Okay, so a little bit more on the benefits. This tells the parents too. They can see how their student is doing behaviorally. Do they redo a lot of assignments? Do they turn work a lot of it late? Are they better talking or writing? And all of those things can really help with placement. And the late absent form, I was floored the first time it happened, then surprised the second time it happened. But every year I've had someone disclose something that I would have had no idea otherwise. And that's just, I want my kids to be healthy and I want them to be okay. I want school to be a safe place for them. And if they're in some sort of crisis and they're not comfortable saying it, but they're willing to type it, that's good enough for me and we can get them help. Okay, so things that I stopped doing. I stopped rounding and giving extra credit. I don't feel guilty about a grade that's earned. I have a huge reduction in grade grubbing, and the parent interactions about grades has gone down tremendously, especially at the high school level. In the QR code, you can also click on this, and this goes into the policies in a little bit more detail. Now, before we do this, my wife is her family is from the Rochester, Buffalo area. Go Bills, compelled to say that. And her cousin and some of her cousin's kids are all teachers in the Alcott, Newfane area in rural, like in between Buffalo and Rochester. And I was talking to them about this and they were like, ooh, that's kind of cool. Do you mind if I try this? I'm like, no. Do you mind if you have this slide deck? Sure. And they started it at the elementary school level. And what was really, really interesting, and they used the decimal slightly different, they had one decimal that indicated the student turned in the assignment but could have tried harder. And students, and this is wild, and I think it was like a 0.4. A student would rather have a 6.0 than a 9.4. And the kids are really, like the kids have really tuned into the behavioral or that numerical side even more than we expected, and they're having huge success with it. And that's really exciting. Now, there's stuff that is changing where it's making it easier for students to get a lot more detailed feedback. We had an in-service earlier in the year where we were looking at feedback using an AI tool called Brisk. Also, we've seen that a lot of the other AIs can do this, and they can give students a little bit more written feedback individually for each assignment. This system still works. You may just have to tailor the written feedback from the AI instead of having the AI be like, go over everything with them and take care of all the misconceptions. Be like, you could say something specific in your prompting where you're like, help them better understand a misconception here, help them understand, and then they can come back and do this. So now, this is kind of a big lift. Let's all take a moment and talk about it. Like, would something like this work at the grade level you're teaching? Is there questions you have? Is there anything, like, I think I found something that was really easy for me, and it reduced a lot of dealing with the missing emails. It meant that I had much better conversations a lot of time in placement meetings, and I felt like my recommendations for classes for the following year were much better, had a lot more evidence to support them. Okay, so let's take a moment. Turn and talk to your neighbor. Did I break anyone? It's really simple.
So, I'm Antonio, by the way.
Janine.
Okay.
I guess I already do the majority of what you do, and really they need to retake. Our grade book is we're going to be formative and summative, so at least for me, my summatives they can retake ad nauseum, whereas formatives have like a 3-week deadline. So I think the only thing that differs, I'm more of a zero person, but that's because they can redo it as many times as they want within the scope of the cycle. So that's what part where it's different. But everything else I very much
So
ascribe to.
you could even age the zeros. I don't know if you could like set up a rule in the grade book where it's like after so many days, then revert to. That's above my programming level. I'm like all thumbs.
So, when you do the redos, do the students have multiple activities or is it just one class?
They can redo it as many times as they want. The one thing that's all.
Do that form.
Yes, and that memorializes it, and that then puts together the paper trail. So if I had a few students who are like, I'm going to try harder, and I'm like, hey buddy, you said this 3 times, it's working. And then it's like, it's really interesting to slide the confession back to them and then pull it back for the ones, like, because sometimes people will try and play games a little bit in the beginning, and then they're like, oh, and it's, like, it also gives them a lot more ownership of their grades and what they're doing, which is remarkable too, because that really helps them. That helps. Like, I'd rather kids take responsibility than just be like, well, it's a grade and that's it, and just. So that, because it's like, this is the stuff they're going to need when they get out there, too.
How often do you go through the forms? Like that's
I
my
do
management of this.
I do that. It's like I'm an inherently disorganized person, and like I actually in my bag I've got a purple notebook which I call my binky, and if I was to lose that, you'd find me in a corner sucking my thumb because I write everything in it. So I must do it every Thursday afternoon. Like my kids have my kids have parkour, and when they're in parkour, I'm going through that as a rule. You could do it every 2 weeks, you could do it more, you could do it less, but for me, having a rule, it's like at 6:30, or during like a prep period, but I have to do it at the same time every time. I write it down, and I have all sorts of different things because otherwise it's chaos. And then the other thing I did, which I forgot, and I should mention this, is I tend to lock this out during the last 2 weeks of the marking period. So I will, as a rule, I tend to front load my marking periods, and I tend to take the last 2 weeks and shove it to the next marking period for everything except the fourth marking period, because like Sandy really freaked me out, and I always think that there's a big storm that could shut down my school and cause gradebook chaos for 2 to 4 weeks. And that's like my own crazy that I carry with me. Okay.
We had a couple questions.
Sure.
I like this. So, as far as like this, keeping like notes of the students, if you have a kid who say didn't turn in a bunch of stuff, and normally would have say all the 5s to nobody, and then they redid it, and now they have 9s on it, how do you still have a record of like what they're doing?
In the spreadsheet.
It's in the
So you know, and you're seeing those rack in. And then the thing is that I'll say that this is like, one of the big things I've found that's really hard is that a lot of times we like having all these policies, and then we, the teachers, pigeonhole ourselves into a situation where we're like, it's like I say, hey, you've got it as long as you're not abusing it. And so if I've got a kid who's just stacking them up, then they sit down and I'm like, here's the stack. And then they're like, uh-oh. And then like, you're getting close. And usually they find a little bit of religion and they start getting better. But the big thing is that this really promotes accountability, where students have to take ownership. And that's when like some of the why it was late are like hysterical. Like you're just like, wow. Other times it's like, oh my gosh, I've got to call guidance now. And that was the other thing that I totally didn't expect. And it's been remarkable because I've caught people who have not presented at all, who've been in like really big crisis. So it's a good idea to look at it like weekly or bi-weekly. But yeah, that was kind of the neat thing. And the easy thing is that there's no prep. You don't have to pay anyone any money. You don't. It's just like it's kind of turnkey almost. It's just like the thing that's hard is I think that you've got to do all 4 things, and that can represent a big change and a big jump. Like sometimes people will try it in a class or 2 classes, and then the other thing that can be challenging is like, let's say we have like 30 sections of biology in our school right now. So if it was just one class of bios that was doing it and the other 9 weren't, that could
policies are so different.
Yeah, so it's like I'm lucky. I'm like the only makerspace teacher. I'm the only robotics teacher, and like last year I was the only enviro teacher. But I found that it worked really, really well to like catch that.
If I turn it in, if I redid the assignment, it's 79.9.
Correct.
If my assignment was turned in late, it's 79.8.
And then if you came in and went over and talked to me about it, usually you're gonna score higher, but it's got a 0.7 tag on it, so we know that you're someone like. We have some students, like a lot of times students who are ODD, oppositional defiant, are like, I'm not writing this. Like, cool, why don't we just talk about it? And they're like, oh, okay. And that's where, because I've had a lot of kids who are just, they're like, want to fight the man. And I'm like, but you know this, why don't we talk about it? And then I'm like, cool, we're good. And they're like, was that easy? I'm like, yeah. and then they'll come back, and it's like a lot of times, they'll go over stuff orally the first marking period, or if you've got a kid, and then if you've got a kid who's like broken and they just can't write, then you don't have to worry about that. Or you could be like 9.97 and like still have that oral component there. But it's a really great way to like build rapport and build trust too, where the students start getting more comfortable. And I've had a lot of the oppositional defiant kids who will either be like, hey, can I just come talk to you about it? And or oh, I think I'll just write this one. I'm like, oh, okay, great. And it's like, and like, meanwhile, they're getting tossed out of other classes because they didn't put their name on something. It's like, yeah. One thing I realized that I totally forgot was because I don't, again, it's like trying to avoid headaches. I usually, for marking periods 1, 2, and 3, will close out the marking period as far as redos about 2 weeks before the end of the marking period. And I'll warn the students way in advance. And then I'll just usually push the last 2 weeks onto the following marking period because I don't necessarily want to see everyone the day before Thanksgiving going, it's like, nope, we're beyond that. Okay, so questions?
So for an assignment that was not turned in, I'm in your class, I did nothing, I handed in nothing.
50.5% of whatever the point value is. And then I just, I am a little bit lazy on this and I make all my assignments divisible by 2. There's no 15, it's like it's either 14 or 16, it's not 15. And then, again, it's just like the nice thing about that and using that as a placeholder is that a student till really close to the bitter end could still possibly get that up to a 65, a 66 and get over the line. They're not going to end up with like an A+, but it's just like sometimes, like again, sometimes the students just be like, oh, I'm not X, Y, and Z for a bit. And it's like, okay, we'll get to you when you're ready.
Do you not return any other students' work?
No, I'll return all the work. And because usually if they're not getting full credit, they've got some sort of misconception. And with the late absent thing, they're coming back. And like there is like a student, like if you and I did the assignment at the same time and I totally tanked it, you did great on it. I'm like, hey, let me see your work. And then I copied it over and turned it in with the late absent form. This system doesn't necessarily fully catch that. I've been leaning a lot more to Google Docs as far as paper. Again, I'm an inherently disorganized person, and having things all on the computer, it's really hard for me to lose Google. I think yesterday with the Amazon failure, it might have been possible, but like, so it's like most of the stuff, and then I'll see it, and especially a lot of the things are with actual drawn out models where they're showing interactions, and it's harder to copy. It's not impossible. So this is far from foolproof, but I found for most students it's working a lot better.
So I was talking to Melissa about like workload with this, right? You're grading everything twice, this kind of thing.
No,
But
you're only grading
is it-
some of it twice.
Right, but is it like you grade fewer things because there aren't any more completion grades? Because there's no need for a completion grade if
Correct.
you're always looking for competence.
Correct.
So you grade like sometimes I might have 25 grades, maybe now we only have 15, but we're looking for competence out of those 15. So like the study guide that I get 5 points for doing, I don't need to do anymore because you either do the study guide or not, you're on your own, and then the test is locked in. No.
Hey, you in the black shirt, could you earmuffs for a second?
Earmuffs.
Yeah, sometimes there may be small completion grades in there too.
But that wouldn't be a
And
redo. That would
yeah,
just
and that wouldn't be a
we
that wouldn't be a
did
redo.
Great job on the one
Yeah.
today. Everybody, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
But not as much.
that's what department head. Yeah,
Not
yeah.
as
So
much.
it's a lot
Each
less
grade
and it's
is
bigger.
a significant amount of that.
Yeah, but this is for bigger assignments, and especially, so in our 8th grade in Westfield, we're leaning pretty heavily into Open Sci-Ed. So you have a lot of models that the students are producing, and if you had a model where it was like for the love, where it just totally went in the wrong direction.
You give them a 2.0 out of 10, and they okay, because they can redo it.
Yeah, and then you've also flagged them, and then you also see that it was redone, so that then when they come back and it's redone and they demonstrate competency, you've got in your mind, ooh, they didn't get it the first time. Let's see what happens with the next model and see if there's any sort of improvement. And then you also have the spreadsheet that memorializes all the assignments too. So then in the spreadsheet, they would say, I'm sorry, I just totally didn't understand the assignment. I did this instead. You're
But you
like,
could even
cool.
pull out the kids, all that kids' responses on the spreadsheet, because you could sort it.
Uh-huh.
You could say, little Jeffy has turned in, this was his excuse, this time, and then this time, and then this time, and the same assignment 4 times.
Yeah, and I've had that conversation, and usually the students kind of straighten up and they're like, ooh, I need to do something different or better. And it's like, cool, I'm glad you're owning this and you're taking responsibility to make it better. And that's really the cool thing, because we want our students to own and take responsibility, but also we want them to be comfortable failing in a science class. We want things to go wrong. We want them to go wrong while they're wearing safety glasses. We want them to go wrong while they can still count all their fingers, but we want projects to break and not work, and them to understand, oh, I've got to fail. I'm not always going to be successful right away. Okay, so let me go back to, actually let me do 2 things. I'm going to go here. I'm going to go here. Okay, then you go there. And I will promise to return emails within about 24 hours-ish. Unless you email me on the half day on Thanksgiving, then you'll hear from me afterwards. Okay, so if you have any other questions, if you think of anything, I've been trying this for about 5 years now, and I think it's been great. I have family that's been trying this for about 3, and they think it's been phenomenal. So if you're like, ooh, we want to hear more about this, ooh, could you do a Google Meet with us? Could you Zoom in with us and stuff like that? Gladly. So I think that it's been much better for me, and I think it's also been much better for kids. And I also think it's been phenomenal because we've caught kids in crisis that we didn't know. And that was like the big payoff for me too. So this checks off a lot of happy boxes. Okay, any other questions? I think we killed it. Okay, awesome. Thank you all so much for coming in this afternoon, and be here for a few more minutes.